Some paths lead us forward toward the future, but some paths lead us back to the past. Dawn breaks over the abandoned Hollow Creek mine. The air is cold and carries the damp scent of the earth. Ethan Cole, a young sheriff, sits outside the entrance, meticulously comparing an ancient symbol in his predecessor's leather journal to a faded seal etched into a nearby rock. It is the mark of Blackrock mining, a name long buried in the town's history. Behind Ethan, his companion Ruth anxiously points out the crumbling wooden supports. She knows a cave-in could happen at any moment. Lena, the young woman with a unique gift, stands silently. She closes her eyes and hears an invisible sound, the three-note shift-change whistle, a familiar melody of the miners, even though it has been silent for decades. Ethan turns a page in the journal. A tiny, almost faded handwritten note catches his eye. Stash under vent 3, tap 3 times. It is a code. Jonah, the experienced guide, has already found a narrow passage, one once used by smugglers. They have little time. The lantern oil is running low, and on the hill above, Silas Crow's men have appeared. They are waiting, but Ethan knows that no treasure is as valuable as the truth. He makes a decision. He will go down. He must face the past. He believes the ghosts down there will show him the way. The narrow entrance, a claustrophobic trap, forced Ethan to crawl. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and coal dust. His lantern's light fell on rusted or carts, scattered like iron skeletons. A canary cage lay on its side, the door ajar. It was once a symbol of life, of fragile hope, but now it served only as a grim reminder of what had happened. Ethan pushed deeper. He saw a hastily carved arrow on a wooden support, marked with 3 X's. This symbol, it matched the ones in Sheriff Caleb's journal. He followed the arrow and discovered something else, a telegraph receiver box. It was covered in dust, but the dust on top was thin and warm. Someone had used this line, and recently. The past was not a ghost in this place. It was an active presence, and it was not alone. Ethan found a bricked-up alcove, carefully sealed with a wax stamp. The mark of Blackrock mining. Inside, there was no gold or valuables, but something far more damning. Pages torn from the journal. They were orders. Along with them, a pocket watch, its lid engraved with a double C. Caleb Crow? Or Caleb the Sheriff? He read. Every line, every number, it all pointed to a horrifying truth. Financial records tied to the order to safely seal the vents and a controlled explosion, all on the very night that so many miners' families vanished. This was no accident. It was a deliberate trap. And the most terrifying part was that Sheriff Caleb had recorded it all. He knew, but he couldn't stop it. A moral shockwave hit Ethan. The past was not just a truth, it was a profound shame. Suddenly, a flickering light appeared ahead, and behind him, another figure. Silas Crow's men had found him. They blocked both exits. A voice echoed down the entrance, filled with menace. It ordered Ethan to leave the journal and go. But Jonah, who was on the surface, had already discovered a terrifying new detail. A fresh tripwire had been set. They knew he was coming. The human threat had closed its circle. Ethan was trapped, with no way out. The footsteps of Silas's men echoed from both directions, a percussive beat in the heart of the earth. Their lantern lights were like twin red eyes, closing in. A voice, cold and powerful, boomed down from the main entrance, amplified by an old copper funnel. It was Silas Crow. He offered a simple, chilling command: leave the journal and go, or you'll never see the light again. The threat wasn't just for Ethan, but a reminder of the silence he had bought. Ethan realized something terrifying. They knew he had found the journal, and they didn't just want to stop him. They wanted to bury the truth once more. The threat had tightened its grip, not of a single man, but of an entire system. Just as the pursuers appeared, something else began to materialize. A translucent, shimmering figure, a wisp of smoke. It was Caleb, the former sheriff. He didn't speak, but he looked directly at Ethan, and a clear stream of thought entered his mind. Caleb had signed the papers not out of greed, but because he was threatened by BlackRock. The entire town was under their control, and silence had been bought with gold. He had documented it all, but couldn't prevent the tragedy. Now, he pleaded with Ethan not for vengeance, but to reveal the truth. Courage, he seemed to say, isn't about fighting present dangers, but about facing your own mistakes. The truth had two sides. Ethan watched Caleb's ghost fade. He understood. He would expose both sides of the story, Silas's cruelty and Caleb's failure. There was no time for fear. Ethan decided to turn the mine into a trap. He pushed a rusty ore cart onto an incline, connecting it to an old, abandoned detonator. The plan was to trigger a controlled cave-in, just enough to block Silas's gunmen. At the same time, Ruth, who had made her way inside, touched the telegraph receiver box. She realized she could transmit a signal from here. The plan was clear. Use the church bell as a confession. 3 rings. Ethan would force Silas to confess, and Ruth would send his name to the town. They had to act before the mine collapsed again. They entered a small, flooded chamber with a few remaining supports. Silas appeared. He offered a bag of gold, urging Ethan to leave. He mocked Lena, calling her a fool, and disparaged Caleb as a coward. But Ethan had the evidence. He placed the lost orders pages on a wooden support, a bait, and an undeniable piece of proof. Silas's lantern shone on Ethan's tense face, and he said, "Say your name out loud." The confrontation had begun. The battle was not just between the living, but between the dead and the truth that yearned to be revealed. The confession began. Ethan's voice was cold and steady as he read from the journal. He read the names of those who took payments, about the fake safety orders, about the night the mine collapsed. Silas stood opposite him, enraged. He blurted out corrections, each word a piece of damning evidence against himself. He couldn't control his anger, and each time he spoke, Ruth, on the surface, tapped it out in Morse code, each signal racing back to the town. Her tapping was steady, an irrefutable confession. Suddenly, the ghosts of the miners gathered behind Silas, shimmering figures of smoke. The wooden supports trembled, producing the familiar 3-note melody. Caleb, the sheriff's spirit, stepped out, shielding Ethan from Silas's gun. The shot rang out. Not for the living. Caleb wavered, then faded away, accepting death once more, but this time to protect what was right. Ethan didn't hesitate. He pushed the rigged ore cart down the slope. The fuse flared. A loud explosion, and giant boulders fell, blocking the way. The mine collapsed, but in a controlled manner. Water began to rise, flooding the chamber. The lantern flickered and died. Silas was trapped, alive, but pinned next to the telegraph box. He looked up, awaiting his punishment. From the town, the church bell rang 3 times. The confession had been successfully transmitted. Caleb nodded faintly at Lena, his eyes filled with peace, and he vanished into thin air. The pages of the journal in Ethan's hand felt warm, as if absolved. When they emerged, Jonah and Ruth were waiting. Ethan looked at Jonah and said, "I didn't bury these pages to feel at peace. I faced them to set others free. The case of Hollow Creek was resolved. But it was not the end. On the hill, new riders appeared, more numerous and more formally dressed. They were superiors from Blackrock Mining, arriving after the signal had been sent. And on the telegraph box, the final Morse code message appeared: next episode, Judgment at Blackrock.